Hello and welcome to episode 22 of Dissect Discussions. I'm your host, AB Basson. In this week's episode, I'm joined by former Bafana Bafana forward, George Zulu Shark Dearnaley. We chat about AmaZulu's rise, club ownership, South Africa's AFCON failure, and much, much more. This is simply an episode you don't want to miss. George, thanks for joining me on Dissect Discussions. I think a perfect place to start is AmaZulu. Obviously, they're battling at the right end of the standings, which is great to see for a club of that stature. Obviously under new ownership quite recently. What have you made of them this season? Obviously, the introduction of Benni McCarthy as head coach has also boosted them a lot in recent weeks.
Yeah, I think, when the new owners took over, they made a big statement. They went into the transfer market. They bought some big names. And the biggest one, obviously, Simpiwe Shabalala. But straight away, they got criticism that it was becoming an old age home. And there was some criticism about some of the players and their ages, which I kind of defended by saying that you can never underestimate the experienced players, their contribution on a Monday to Friday, on the training pitch, in the corridors. And then if you only evaluate them or base their performance on the 90 minutes that they can or can't give you on a weekend, you're missing the point. I think AmaZulu needed some experienced players to just kind of guide some of the youngsters. So that was one step. Then the chairman made quite a big statement that he was tired of the club fighting relegation and being in the bottom four, and he couldn't understand why they couldn't change the mindset and be a top four side. And that's easier said than done, obviously. But he's a very successful business guy. He's come through Umlazi, all the way into the top of business. So he's got a path to success in his own mind. And now it was a case of translating that into a football club, but again, not easy. And they didn't have a good start. And then I think he realized that Cobra Dlamini was maybe a little bit out of his depth as a new coach. And, they picked a winner, with Benni. And I said, I've chatted about this to a couple of people, that just putting Benni in the job wasn't enough. You had to surround Benni with the people that he wanted. And I think a lot of clubs in South Africa make the mistake of appointing a head coach, but then saying, but you have to use all these other people that are already at the club. Benni could bring in his own people, and obviously he brought in Munib, and they've played together and they know each other really well. And then Basil as well, Vasily Manitsakis, and having Bele Nomveti. People forget him and Benni played up front together for the SA Olympic side. So Benni put his technical team together, and suddenly you had all the right elements, but the fact that they've all gelled in a relatively short space of time is nothing short of fantastic. Brilliant. And I'm an AmaZulu fan, so really chuffed there.
In the day of super leagues and stuff like that, where we see a big gap between ownership and the fans on the ground, is it refreshing to see an owner, like the AmaZulu owner, that's really hands-on, that seems to love the club? Is it really refreshing in your eyes? And you think that bodes well for the club going forward?
Yeah, I love it. I love his passion. He leads the chants. He's now for the club. He wears his replica shirt everywhere. I saw on Twitter that he was giving some history lessons, on Zulu culture and Zulu history and that. And, that's all stuff that, because I'm a student of history and when I played at AmaZulu, I wanted to learn about the club. I've actually read like a 5,000-page book on the history of the Zulu people. And there's an owner who really puts his heart and soul, and that's like a term that's kind of easily thrown around, but he really lives it. He puts his heart and soul into his ownership of the club. And it is refreshing, especially in the day and age when franchises are bought and sold, like every 5 minutes. It's ridiculous that a club like Wits can lose 99 years of history, at the stroke of a pen. So, I'm really chuffed by Mr. Zungu and the family and the business that's behind it and the passion. And, and I hope they get the success that they deserve.
Yeah, his history lessons while kayaking was kind of cool. I enjoyed that.
I watched that one as well.
Obviously Benni has now been linked with the Bafana job. I think, that's always going to be the case. A guy like him, legend like him, will probably step into those shoes one day. I don't know if it's the right time for him right now. But, we're obviously searching for a new coach. Carlos Queiroz has been, his name has been touted as the favorite. What do you make of Bafana Bafana right now? We obviously find ourselves in a really dark place, having lost to Sudan and, in AFCON qualifiers. And, all 6 World Cup qualifiers will take place in the next few months. How do you see us doing in a very, very difficult group?
Yeah, firstly, the situation is nothing short of a circus, to be honest. The fact that Benny's having a good season and suddenly someone's saying that he should be the Bafana coach, and that's a credit to Benny, but it really shows the real lack of planning, forward thinking at the highest level. And I don't know Molefi Ntseki well enough to judge him as a person. By the feedback that I've got, he's a nice enough man. He's a decent enough coach. But it's nothing short of a shocking decision that he was appointed in the first place, with no real experience. And the results proved the doubt is right, and now it's kind of like another last-minute decision. I mean, the first qualification match is around the corner. They don't have a coach. We're in a tough group. See, there's no mistake in that. And I heard that the terms of the new agreement will be that the coach gets a bonus if we qualify for the World Cup. I mean, it's the coach even wins 3 games. He's done an unbelievable job. So I think it's a bit of a shambles at the moment. And if I was Benny's advisor, I would say don't touch the job right now. It's toxic. You're on a hiding to nothing. There's no real support structures. There's no success is really going to be really, really tough. So I think he's doing fantastic at a club level. I think he needs to stay there for a good couple more years. And no matter what a fantastic player he was, and he's a born winner, I know Benny quite well, and he will fight to win a throw-in, to win a corner, never mind a football match. So his time will come. He is the future Bafana coach. There's no doubt about that in my mind, but not right now. So right now there's going to be an interim coach. I don't know who would take it, but when you see 40 coaches applying for the chipper job every month, that means there's a market for coaches. So someone's going to take the job, but I think that coach is on a hiding to nothing.
The Vision 2022 was obviously thrown around, a few years back. But it seems like there's a lot of short-term planning instead of long-term planning, and realistically. Do you think that's been, the huge problem for our downfall and real cause for our downfall over the last few years is there doesn't seem to be real planning going into the Bafana Bafana structure?
AB, I had a long conversation with the German under 16 coach, been given a 4-year program to win the European under 16 championship. So he had a 4-year program. This is under 16s. And he had selected 200 players in the first year, and then it was down to 100, and then down to the final 60, and then he finally picked his squad. And they lost in the final against Holland on penalties, and he got fired. That's under 16 level 4-year planning. Now, the way they work it out is there's got to be a long-term plan, then there's a medium-term plan, and then there's a short-term plan, but it's all got to be linked.
Yeah.
And someone's got to monitor it and evaluate it. I don't think anyone's got a real plan for South African football. There's definitely not a 20-year plan, and I mean, if Belgium put together a 10-year plan, and that generation of players are Eden Hazard and Romelu Lukaku, that was a 10-year plan. We just kind of live, I think we almost live week to week, what are we going to do next week? And we're playing Cape Verde away. No one even knew it was an AstroTurf. It's small things that's really frustrating as an I'm embarrassed to some ex-players sometimes. So I don't know what the short-term plan right now is to find a coach in the next couple of weeks. So the fact that you haven't got a coach right now means you can't plan, because the coach has got to be involved in the planning. About the under 23s, about the under 20s, about the under 17s. I want to know who's scouting. I want to know who's playing regular minutes. I looked at the Olympic squad. I know David Notwane really well, but I'm very curious as to some of those selections. And that's the Olympic squad is the future of Bafana Bafana.
Yeah,
but it just doesn't seem like that everything fits. It's almost like there's a project over there and there's a project over there, and please God, maybe they meet somewhere in the middle. But I'm not convinced.
Obviously, you've been involved at amateur football and in the ABC Motsepe League of Magic FC. So you've seen where football should start in the country. Obviously, there's still a lot to be done in that aspect. For everyone that doesn't know and doesn't understand, what problems we face in, the lower leagues, can you maybe just give us a short recap or whatever of what's going on in the lower leagues? And obviously of COVID-19, it's made everything a lot worse.
Yeah, listen, it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, your show's not long enough for all the issues I experienced in my 7 years in the ABC League, but the reason we keep going back is we love the game, and it's the small victories. It's seeing a young player like Tupela Koki that's at AmaZulu now, who played for me in the ABC Molefi League at 17. He was a gangly, clumsy kid, and myself, Gerald Stober, Keegan Walker, we worked on him. And 2 years later, he signed a 5-year contract at AmaZulu. And 2 years into his contract, he was the club captain, at 21 years old. And now he's starring for the club. So it's those type of success stories. That's why we changed the name to Magic as well. Tupela signing that contract was the magic of football. It's stuck in my head. There are small victories. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of passionate people. There are people who give their time and their energy every single week, and they don't make a cent. They don't make any money out of football, but they love it, versus the people who are making the money, and they're not all bad people, but there's a lot of people making money in football who don't love football, and I don't even know if they care about football. As long as they're getting their payment. And the ABC Molefi League is an under-23 league. That's kind of your development, supposed to be your development phase for NFD and then PSL. But then when the MDC League came in, it kind of became a competitor to the under-23 league. And so there's no real money in the under-23 league. I won't tell you how much money I spent over 7 years, and I will never get it back. But it was an expensive education, but it was a brilliant education because I can do pretty much everything in football now. And you have to have grassroots. You have to have people playing on terrible fields and terrible conditions, and we moan at the referees, but thank God for those people who come out and referee those games on bad fields in bad conditions. I've only got a lot more respect for amateur referees because the last few weeks I've been refereeing under 18 games. and my former international career means nothing to some 16-year-old who thinks I've given a bad decision, So, but there's this mismatch between all the money in the top 2 tiers, in fact, really only in the top tier, and nothing from the 3rd division down, and it's not sustainable. There's too many people trying too many shortcuts, and then you've got 19, 20-year-old players who can't take throw-ins, and we're trying to compete with the best in the world. It's impossible.
You've obviously moved away from club ownership now, but if we can maybe just reminisce about Magic FC and the run to the Nedbank Cup, how did that come about? And obviously a lot of work going on behind the scenes. And then you guys, I think, lost to Kaizer Chiefs in the end, 3-0. Was it in East London or Port Elizabeth?
In extra time.
In extra time. Yeah, I won't forget that. What was that like? And obviously that's the magic of the cup. Excuse the pun. What are your best memories of that run?
Well, a few years before that, we got to the last 32 for the first time, and we played Platinum Stars in Rustenburg. Half my team had never been on an aeroplane, which was quite an exciting thing for us. And credit to Platinum Stars, they put out their full team. They had 8 international players playing against us, and we were an ABC Molefi side. And I just said to the guys, just get to halftime in the game. Just 1-0 will be fine. We conceded in the 2nd minute, Elazar Rogers, and then we got a penalty just before halftime. So 2-0 down, 34 degrees, playing in Rustenburg, and then we lost 3-0 as well. But that was the start of kind of a good journey of introducing these young players to what it takes to become a professional. I say the same message to every young player. I sound like a stuck record, but talent is not enough. Talent only opens the door. And I've seen this in my playing career. I've seen talented players who didn't have the right work ethic, didn't have the right attitude, the right discipline. So I've got very good examples to share with these guys. And Tupela was a classic example of a guy, when you said to him, you're doing that wrong, try it this way, he would try it 100 times straight away. Yeah. He trusted us. So the season that we got was 2018, 2019. We won the local ABC Motsepe for the Western Cape. We won our Nedbank Cup final, tight game. Then we had to play the provincial final against the SAB winners. And we played Greenwood Athletic in Steenberg, a hell of a game. Big crowd, hostile, because we were always the away team when you play the team in the lower league. And they missed a penalty that could have taken them 1-0 up. Missed a penalty, hit the crossbar, guy absolutely smashed it. And then We got a goal later on, won that, and we sent Wade Crowley up to Joburg for the draw. And my last words to him, and he even tweeted it, I said to him, Wade, you don't come back without Kaizer Chiefs. If you're going up to and you be on TV, you don't come back without Kaizer Chiefs, because if you're going to play, and the chances of winning that game. And he came back with a Maccabi. We got Maccabi, and we had to go and play them in Dobsonville. So I said, it's Wade, unlucky you didn't give me Kaizer Chiefs, but we'll take Maccabi. So we won that on penalties. We drew 0-0, and we should have lost, but we drew 0-0, and we won on penalties, which was amazing. So Wade went up again, and we said, no, you better come Chiefs. And we got Kaizer Chiefs, and it was incredible. We were supposed to play in Cape Town. We couldn't get a stadium that was available big enough for the level of that game. And we ended up, we got given the option by the PSL of either Port Elizabeth or Durban. And Durban would have been cool for me to go back home, but Durban's also a bit of a home ground for Chiefs. And PE being closer, we chose PE. We played in a World Cup stadium. And the fact is that, AB, our budget for the whole season wouldn't cover Karma Billiat's monthly salary. And he's on the whole team. And to draw 0-0 with them after 90 minutes. I mean, I was arguing at the end of 90 minutes to say you should just give us the game. I mean, a draw should be a victory.
Yeah.
And we conceded a penalty just before halftime of extra time, and you got to chase the game, and then they just killed us. But that really was the magic of the cup. And it's games like that are really an example for every kid in the country that if you work hard and you're disciplined and you're focused, you got a chance, man. You can make it.
I saw Jerry Sicosana bought an ABC team, and you tweeted him and said if he's looking for any advice, he can get in contact with you. What advice do you have for him? Just lastly on that topic, what advice do you have for Jerry? In his venture into club ownership?
Yeah, I think got a lot of lessons about being involved in the ABC Motsepe League, and unfortunately, and this is on the record, it's corrupt. The certain match officials who don't get paid well enough, if they get offered something, they'll probably take it. And that's, I've seen it firsthand. And, I try to fight it from the inside. I wrote letters, you just don't get a response. People aren't interested. And, in hindsight, maybe I could have saved myself a few heart attacks by just being prepared for that and just expecting it and not being as shocked, because I ended up fighting with too many people, moaning, and leaving dodgy football fields late at night, worried that somebody was going to jump out and beat me up or try and attack me or something because of things I'd said. So I think you just got to be aware that it's really, really tough. It's a tough league to win, and not everyone is your friend. Simple as that. Jerry, so I think he can handle himself.
Yeah, that's great advice. Just to go up one division, maybe we just quickly touch on the Glad Africa Championship. Obviously, based in the Western Cape, and myself having been there for 2 years, the Cape Town team seems to have been struggling a bit in recent seasons. If you look at the log right now, I think Steenberg, Cape Town All-Stars, and the Cape Town Spurs now are all fighting in the bottom five rather. Cape United were there, but they've actually moved up quite well in recent weeks. Why do you think that is, and what has to happen in that area for teams to get back into the first division? Obviously, a very, proud area when it comes down to football. You think of Santos and you think of Ajax Cape Town and now Cape Town City. What do teams in that area need to do to get back into top level?
Yeah, it's a curious one, because the talent in the Western Cape is phenomenal. I'm proudly Durban born and bred, but Cape Town's got fantastic talent, incredible number of talented players. One of the reasons might be because there's 4 teams in Cape Town, and Cape Town City as well. So you've got 5 clubs, and Cape Town City obviously in the PSL, but the 4 other clubs are all really competing for talent, and they all know each other really well. And so you've got 6 derby matches, whereas a lot of other teams in their various areas, they might have 1 derby, so 2 matches a season, or no derbies. There's 6 derbies down here, and they're really tough games. And obviously, a lot of the other clubs, obviously based up north, it's a lot of traveling for these guys. I'm really disappointed in the coaching merry-go-round at NFD level as well. I mean, the Cape sides, I can't think of, maybe Cape United are the only ones that I don't think have had a change of coach yet. The other three have all had numerous coaching changes, and not just because of results. It's at one stage, Ian Taylor I thought he was doing quite well at Cape Town Spurs. He just picked up a good couple of results, getting on track, and then, he got released. So it's a weird one. I think the Cape sides just need to almost be a little bit more organised, organised and a little bit more patient, because the talent's definitely here.
Yeah, Coach V, Steve Barker, I didn't forget about Stellenbosch FC, obviously also competing in the top flight.
What about Stellenbosch?
Yeah. Yeah, and then maybe if we can move on to the DStv Premiership, as we call it now. You spoke early on in the podcast about Bidvest Wits. I was lucky enough to be involved with them in the bubble last year. And it was almost surreal when they played Polokwane City on the final day, and thinking, this is the end of 99 years of tradition. Obviously, they just won the league a few seasons back. How sad were you as a football fan that you are? How sad were you to see them just dissolved like that?
Yeah, again, I collect all, we've chatted about this football memorabilia and that. I've still got the cigarette cards of the NFL players in South Africa from the 60s and the early 70s, and old match programs. And I love the history of South African football, and the fact that franchises can be bought and sold and names changed and history just down the toilet off. It's a really sad situation. I just got off a presentation just now with the head of methodology at Athletic Bilbao. It's a club from 1898. You can't imagine that those big European clubs will ever just change the names. It does happen. There's a couple of examples, but Witbank Black Aces was an unbelievable club. What are their supporters? What do they talk about now? My sad story is that I played for Seven Stars, that doesn't exist. I played for Hellenic, and I played only half a game for Mother City. They don't exist. So, if I start talking to people about the teams I played for, only one I can really talk about is AmaZulu, because the others don't even exist anymore. So, Hellenic have got a great academy, but it's a really sad thing. And in Witz's case, it was really a disappointing thing, because that's an institution for me. I played many games against them as a junior when I lived in Joburg, and then obviously NSL and PSL football. And just to have that just disappear, it's really sad. So it's another symptom, I think, of the issues around South African football. I think you can't just look at what's happening with Bafana Bafana in isolation. I think there's a knock-on effect of all these things, of corruption in the ABC Motsepe League, of the merry-go-round in the NFD, of PSL franchise being bought and sold, into, the Bafana coach being hired at the last minute. There's a lot of issues, and I'm shocked that there isn't a bigger, louder debate. There's no protest about it. And South African football, it's the biggest sport by a million miles in this country. It's our passion. Yeah. We've got some really big institutions. I mean, Kaizer Chiefs, Pirates. I mean, those are fantastic South African football brands. But I don't think there's enough people that are that concerned about. There are people that are concerned, but we're just not making a big enough effort to say we need to change.
Yeah, Bilbao are so unique. I mean, just choosing Basque players and relying solely on that for, like you said, a century. It's just quite incredible. If we can maybe just talk about your career quickly, and what do you think is the difference of when you were playing the game and, today? I see you quite often tweet about soft players, and I think Son has taken a few hits in recent weeks, and there was, I think, Ceballos.
He deserves a few hits.
Danny Ceballos Danny Ceballos of Arsenal for the penalty which ended up not being a penalty against Everton. What do you think is the biggest difference between when you played the game and today's players?
Well, I think it's also hard to compare today's players across the world, because obviously in Europe with VAR and in South Africa you don't have VAR. So I think the European-based players are almost taking advantage of VAR. I think they've worked out that if you go down, it's going to get reviewed. And I don't think the guys that are operating VAR can really gauge the severity of the contact, especially if they haven't played the game. I mean, Ceballos, when he dived for Arsenal, I mean, that's a booking for me for simulation. But I mean, I I never want to be one of those, the older I get, the better I was type of thing. In my day, the tackle from behind was legal. It was part of the game. We didn't know any better. It wasn't like we argued that they tackled from behind. That was the law of the game, And when you got guys like Gavin Lane and John Salter and Brooks Madar hammering you from behind, and now I'm 52 and I've had 6 knee operations, kind of tells a story, So I think the guys who played in the 60s, even worse, and then 70s, 80s, I played in the early 90s. I think the modern footballer is protected, and I think they milk it a little bit with regards to the diving and the simulation. I also understand why, because the reward is huge if you get the free kick or you get the penalty, and it's all about results for sure. Biggest difference is that we were amateurs, really. We talk about we were professionals, but we weren't. Because I can't even think of anyone at AmaZulu who was a full-time professional. In my day, I worked in the mornings and then I had training in the evenings. Clive Barker was our coach, but he was working at Puma during the day, and then he would come and coach in the evening. So we weren't professional by any stretch. The conditioning of the players today is absolutely phenomenal. They're unbelievable athletes. Video technology, analysis, conditioning, diets, all those things. We were actually a million miles away from where they are now. But when you go and watch the footage, and I can see the level now is much more professional and quicker and stronger and all those things. But it's not entertaining. And it almost looks like the conveyor belt someone has turned up the dial with the speed of it. And the guys are coming off the conveyor belt much quicker, but they've had less time to prepare and to hone their technique. I'm a big fan of the 10,000 hour rule, because I spent every spare minute kicking a ball, either trying to dribble my 2 Rottweilers or make my brother be the goalkeeper or breaking my mom's pot plants, trying to hit the targets, whatever it was, but it's hours and hours and hours. And no academy, you play amateur football, go to college, and then suddenly you're playing for Bafana. I mean, it was a shock. These guys are coming through the academy, and then and everyone's in a race to produce the next talent, the next quickest, youngest talent. And he comes out and he's suddenly under pressure to win games. And I think it's a little bit unfair in a way, but the money's big and everyone's desperate to get it. But the product on the field is not good enough. International players who don't always control the ball, and we never control the ball well all the time, but we were amateurs. But these guys should really be able to control the ball and pass the ball much better than what they're doing at the moment. So there's this disconnect between the more money and the more pressure, the less ability almost. It's quite sad.
As South Africans, I think we like to reminisce about the 90s, especially because, we obviously won the AFCON and did so well in the 2 tournaments after that. I think we came second and then third. As Afrikaans speaking football follower, a lot of, I think, quite, 1 in a million. So I think a lot of people, especially family members, they ask me, why is Bafana Bafana doing so shit today? Why aren't they as good as they were in the 90s? 96, obviously, teams go through generations where you've got great players. You used Belgium as an example earlier on, and it was a great example because of the quality they have now. What do you think has gone wrong for us? It's obviously we could spend a few hours debating this, but on the surface, do you think we just don't have the type of players that can compete with the rest of the world at this given time?
No, we have the players. That's all we've got, actually. We've got the players. I don't think the organization and administration is as good as it can be. I think that's lacking. I don't think we use sports science enough. I also sometimes want to blame the players that I don't think they're professional enough in terms of their attitudes with how they live their lives, how they look after their bodies off the field. One of the biggest issues is the lack of competitive school football. And right now is exceptional because of COVID, but we're talking over the last 10 years. I remember being in that Bafana squad with Fani Madida and Dr. Kamalo, Shoes Michaud, Lucas Udebe, all these top stars. But they will all tell you how good their school football was. They all came through good school football programs. And obviously in their day, I was in Matric 86 with a lot of the guys of my generation in that Bafana squad. And it was full-time apartheid, so it wasn't like the black guys and the colored guys and the white guys were playing against each other. The black guys were, playing soccer amongst themselves in Soweto. Colored guys in the Cape were playing against each other and everything. But there was this very well-organized school football organizations, very competitive. And then we used to have our interprovincial tournaments. Again, I played, all white kids, but the Natal side of white players have the likes of Mark Davies and Robbie Milne, Grant and Greg Hepburn, guys who all ended up playing PSL level because the school football was very high level. Then, I don't know how many years ago, there was this big fight about who ran school football, and it ended up being that no one ran it because while they were busy fighting, and it wasn't that well organized. And I think you had a lot of guys relying on club football. And then you also had the club football structures merging, and you had the former, black area administrators, white area administrators, all trying to compete for positions at the combined table. And I think that was also a bit of chaos. So I think club football levels kind of dropped. This is a generalization, but I think club football and school football all kind of dropped at the same time. And there was a generation of players who lost out. They didn't have enough organized, competitive level of football. And so that generation, and I can't put my finger exactly on which generation it was, but there's a generation of players who really missed out on a lot of their development, a lot of their training. I get the sense now, and I'm doing something with the KZN Football Association, the High School Football Association, I get the sense that people have worked it out, and I think there are people slowly taking more control and getting themselves better organized. And I think that we'll see a better level of, let's call it grassroots football. In some provinces, if KZN right now, club football's in a mess. In the Western Cape, it's not. But in KZN, the school football is well organized. In the Western Cape, it's not. So there's a bit of a balancing act here, but I think it's at that level. And when I say grassroots, it's really the 13 to 18 band. And you'll know that the top schools in the Western Cape, they hate football. They don't want to see football there. It's cricket and it's water polo and it's hockey and it's rugby. But the other day I heard that Paul Roos, you'll know quite well, has got a football program, a big football program. Now, 10 years ago, if you walked past that school wearing a football shirt, you would have probably got beaten up. But now they've got a football program. And that gives me hope for the future. A great college in Bloem have got a football program.
Yeah.
It's only a matter of time. Hilton College in Natal, big football program. When you've got these top schools having football programs and then they start giving scholarships and bursaries to talented kids, then the future for Bafana is fine.
Yeah.
But it's going to take probably another generation before we can get on track.
Most definitely. I think Mabasa was, that's obviously now at Orlando Pirates. He was at Grey Bloom, if I'm not mistaken, which is obviously historically a very big rugby school. And we see how good the Springboks have done because of school rugby in the end of the day. Just lastly, two things before we get into your memorabilia, something I'd love to chat to you about and some of the things you've got behind you. Maybe just talk about your favorite players from the 90s. I think, growing up, I was very young still when we won AFCON. Some great names there, legends of the game, Sean Bartlett, Benny, you think of Shoes Mastreo. I think a lot consider him, amongst, the top 5 players South Africa's ever had, Dr. Kumalo, obviously. Who are your favorite players to watch in that era? And, for people who weren't lucky enough to watch them live, which players really stood out for you?
Yeah, so if you don't mind, I'll go back one more generation. When I was like 15, 16 years old, growing up in Durban, I watched the Durban Bushbucks team of 1985. They won and my very first game at Glebe Stadium in Umlazi, I sat on the touchline. And the first player I saw was the number 11 for Morocco Swallows. They were playing Bushbucks. And the number 11 for Morocco Swallows, I don't know who he was, but he was the most skillful player I ever saw in my life. In the second half, the number 11 for Bushbucks was in front of me. And he was even more skillful than the previous more skillful guy. And I was like, who the hell are these guys? These are the best players I've ever seen in my life. And I found out afterwards that the Swallows player was a guy called Asim Nini. And then the Bushbucks guy was Professor Mngubane. And Professor Mngubane was an absolute magician. You know, he was everything great about South African football, wrapped up in a slightly overweight man with the best left foot in the business. And he was an entertainer. He was a match winner. He was a general on the field. He could do everything with the ball. And very good friends with him now. In fact, to call him my father, he was just phenomenal. And there's a generation of people who really missed out on those stars, and they missed out on so much as well. You know, the likes of Ace Nselengu, Joe Masona, Kaza, they were lucky they went to play in America. A guy like Prof, he stayed in South Africa. There should be a stadium named after him because he was really an incredible human being. And at the time, in those 80s, with all the protests and the police orders and state of emergency and all the drama that the guys in the townships had to deal with, Professor gave them hope, and he entertained, and he just made people switch off from all the drama they had to deal with and just watch him express himself on the football field. And he is the one guy that made me think, geez, I can actually play football in South Africa, because I never thought about it. I grew up, my dad's from Scotland, his family are from Manchester. I was born a Man United fan. My hero is Brian Robson, captain of Man United. So I always try to wear number 7 in my career. So suddenly there's a South African guy just absolutely blowing my mind away, thinking, wow, I want to play with that guy. I want to play at this level. And then the second game I watched was Bushbucks against AmaZulu. It was a 4-4 draw in Umlazi, and Prof scored 2 free kicks past Paddy Leering. So I love Prof, but I love the AmaZulu supporters, the chanting and the singing and the noise. And so I decided that's going to be my team. I'm going to support them. So that was at 16. I decided to support them. I started training with them as a schoolboy. Some incredible players at that generation. But then I went to college in America for a couple of years, and then I came back because I just decided that I wanted to be a professional footballer. I wanted to try my luck. It was going to be hard in Europe. And Clive Barker had just become the AmaZulu coach, and he'd asked about me. He knew my parents. And so I came back to AmaZulu, and in a short space of time, he suddenly called up to the national squad. And I didn't know the guys, but I knew the names. And I played against them for the first couple of months of that year, and then you're in the same dressing room or the same training pitch as Dr. Kamalo and Shoes Masha and Fani Madida, who was based in Turkey at the time. And it's only really when you're up close with those guys that you can really see the quality. I mean, Doctor and Shoes were just phenomenal. Just phenomenal. And people always like this Ronaldo versus Messi type, Doctor versus Shoes. But for me, we're just grateful that they were both around at the same time, because I don't think Doctor could have been Doctor without knowing that he had to almost compete against Shoes and vice versa. But they're completely different. Shoes is a better dribbler. Shoes could go past anybody. Doctor is a better passer of the ball. Doctor had great vision. And we always talk about his skills in that. But he was tough as well, because Doctor would get kicked probably 10 times every game. People forget that when you're a Dr. Kamalo, no one's taking it easy on you, and you could tackle from behind. So Doctor was strong because, he was hardly ever out injured. Fani Madida was a goal machine. Calvin Peterson, near the end of his career in the Bafana squad, and we'll still call him a special player because he would, if you didn't say that to him, he'd tell you he's a special player. Young Lucas Shredebe and Sizwe Mutaung, incredible. And then obviously a couple of the old heads, so Neil Tovey, Kuku. On my debut for Bafana, I'll never forget, I hadn't slept the night before because I thought if I make a mistake, that's the end of it. On the field, we're playing Congo, my first World Cup qualifying match, and he came up to me. I didn't have to. He came up to me and he said, don't forget, the game's the same. It's the same ball. It's the same markings. It's 11v11. Don't worry about the crowd. The first time you get the ball, control it and pass it to the nearest player, and then you'll be fine. It's just like, because I'm thinking the first time I get it, I need to try and go past 3 people and put one in,
Yeah.
And so that first pass, you just control it, you pass it, and it's almost like the weight just drops off your shoulders. And that's why there's room for experienced players in the game, and people say, oh, he's 33. South Africa, there's a huge thing around age. Oh, he's 33. He's completely past it. But it's all the tips and advice that guy is giving to the younger players at training that there's no value to it. You can't even measure that.
Yeah, you think of guys like Viomere, Clayton Daniels now. I think clubs have really realized how important these players are, and they're still playing at a high level. You think of Jabulani Maluleke, what a high level he was still playing at Polokwane City last season. Just lastly on your memorabilia, you've obviously collected quite a few cool things. You showed me just before we started the podcast. I think one thing I want to talk about is the soccer balls and the soccer balls from different World Cups, if I'm not mistaken. So if you can maybe just give us a rundown of what you've got, just quickly, that would be great.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty much the full range of the Adidas replica balls from the World Cup, because I actually started by buying World Cup magazines, the match program memorabilia. So, I've got one from Chile, 1962. I've got the one from England, 66. And so while I was collecting the magazines, match programs, then I started going into a couple of other things. And then suddenly it's into the balls and everything. And my wife always fights with me. That's why it's all crammed in my office, because there's no space in the house for it. And it's like, what's the point of all this stuff? But I keep saying it's my pension. It's my pension. So there's a 74 World Cup replica ball from Germany, and then 78. I'm missing on that list up at the top there. There's a signed, that Nike one's a signed Ronaldinho ball. There's the 2006, 1998 in France, actually. I can't find that one at the moment. And the German, the Zeitgeist 2006. So I'm still in the market for that. And if anyone's listening to this, I do have some extras of the earlier ones. I'm in the market for trading. So if you've got a 98 or a Germany 2006, call my agent AB and get in touch with me. There's over 500 football books behind me from 1958 Roy of the Rovers, the very first one. So a lot of football books, a lot of autobiographies of players, from Ferenc Puskas, who played for Hungary and Real Madrid in the 50s, right up to Madiba's boys, where I've got to mention about my injury and all this type of stuff. So, I'm surrounded by football, and I'm not going to show this other part of the office. There's my 1992 Golden Boot is sitting down there in the corner. That's what happens with old footballers. Like your achievements are just kind of hidden. I've got 10 Bafana Bafana jerseys that are signed and framed in my garage. It's the only place I can keep them.
Jeez.
There's quite a collection, and I showed you the little bobbleheads. The Neil Tovies and Shoes and Doctor, and I've got them all up there from 96. But anything that's got like a Bafana Bafana logo on it, I kind of collect that stuff. I'm looking at a signed Kaizer Chiefs cap from the chairman, Kaizer Motaung. It's one of my heroes. Signed that to me, wishing me all the best. And I conceived the South African flag that I took with me to the World Cup in 1994 in America. I was hoping to go there as a player, but I ended up going there as a supporter. And AB, I was at the World Cup final in 94, Brazil, Italy. Unbelievable how I even got a ticket. That's a long story, but I was there like 10 rows from the front, between the 18-yard line and the halfway line, with the South African flag, in my Bafana shirt, waving the flag proudly. And football's given me a lot, man. I love it.
There's a show on YouTube, just before we go, there's a show on YouTube. They always ask, I think it's What You Wore. I think that's the show. They go through players and what jerseys they wore during their career, and the host always asks his guests, if there was a fire, let's now say in your study, and you could only take 3 things with you, what would it be and why?
Only 3 things. I'll take that whole cupboard there, that whole cupboard there, that whole cupboard there. Oh, jeez, if my children aren't in here, then I don't have to worry about them. So, because I grabbed the 2 of them first, and then my wife. But tough one, eh? Jeez, really tough one. I think the Adidas Golden Boot, because it was a great achievement for me. AmaZulu were right near the bottom of the table, and I scored 23 goals that season. Which is still a club record at AmaZulu. But I hope someone breaks that very soon. I've got a signed Man United jersey from the 60s, signed by Bobby Charlton and Nobby Stiles. And Nobby Stiles recently passed away. So, and then just outside my door, I've actually got signed Maradona jersey and an Eric Cantona. So I'll take the Maradona.
Jeepers, yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good choice. Well, thanks, George. Thanks for your insight, and it's great. It's been great chatting to you and getting to know you a bit better. Good luck with everything, and yeah, hopefully we'll catch up soon.
No, luck, AB. Thanks very much.
Cool. Cheers, George.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Dissect Discussions. If you have any questions or guests you'd like me to have on the show, please hit me up at AB_Basson on Twitter or on Instagram. Stay safe, like, subscribe, aware.